honorable ministers, distinguished undersecretaries generals, distinguished professors and chief executive officers, dear guests. On behalf of the Joint Inspection Unit, allow me to express our satisfaction and pride to see such a remarkable mix of competences and skills from all professional and geographical horizons assembled here around the basic idea embodied by our report on the partnerships between the United Nations and the private sector. This is an open ad hoc conference which is in itself an expression of partnership between the United Nations, the private sector and academia. We are grateful to the World Association for Sustainable Development based at the University of Sussex for coming to Geneva with their annual conference, which is the home of a long-standing work of knowledge sharing in service of sustainable development. The time, energy and resources this association invested in this event and in general in promoting sustainability and mobilizing research in the service of developing countries is a very telling expression of commitment to the call for partnerships launched by the Holistic and Universal 2030 Agenda. Indeed, the idea behind our own joint initiative was a professional debate on the spirit that has driven the Joint Inspection Unit report, that is, to improve the current arrangements for partnerships between the United Nations and the businesses, to facilitate mutual understanding and interoperability, to communicate more efficiently and persuade the private sector on the potential of sustainability promoted by the United Nations as a business opportunity. Here we are with more than 300 registered participants and among them 100 high-level experts, practitioners and theorists from all continents coming as panelists. They have been animated by nothing else but a genuine desire to contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda through cross-fertilization of innovative ideas and concepts on policy issues in thematic panels and concrete sustainable development goals case studies. On a personal note, on my own behalf and on my project teammates, Jesus Lara and Hervé Boda, allow me to express my gratitude to the most resourceful interlocutors we interviewed or from whom we simply collected views during the preparation of our report, who not only inspired us in the contents of the report and on the topics we will discuss these days, but they found time to come and participate in person. Lise Kingo, Elmer Lenzen, Dorothea Verman, Angus Rennie, Rajinder Joel, Albena Melin, Barbara Adams, Caroline De Bruyne, Raymond Sanner, Simona Costanzo So, Antonio Hautel, Jonas Svensson, Willem Overbosch, Jose Alcorta, Lucia Sanner, you, Christopher Clark, Marina Skuric-Prodanovic. After all, sustainable development is about people. On a second personal note, I'd like to share with you the revelation that I had when noticed the remarkable presence of the Sudanese diaspora, whose mobilization across 5 continents to contribute to the development of their country of origin as bridge builders beyond political objectives is exemplary. But this exceptional gathering of intellectual resources would not have been possible without a man who embraced this project without hesitation and engaged in restless hard work. Let me praise the devotion, enthusiasm, and unconditional support lent to the organization of this conference and the concept behind it by Professor Allam Ahmed, the President of the World Association for Sustainable Development. Thank you, Allam, and I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Petru, or I call you Petru, my friend Petru now, because that's one of the main outcomes. We're here to be friends. Distinguished ministers, honorable undersecretaries, and all distinguished gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, all of you, academia, professionals, private sector, students, all this room, I welcome you, and it's a great pleasure to see you all here. As just top of my head, when I look at the list, some of you travel. Just let me count those who travel quite a long way. New Zealand, I think, Siham, Australia, America, South Africa, Australia. So you came from all over, not like us. We only flew 1.5 hours, but you flew 20 hours, maybe 20-something hours. And I think 24 hours. Okay. So what encouraged those people who travel 24 hours to come to this conference is something we started in 1999 We are a group of academics, and unfortunately, we lost 3 of our key founders. Kondrim Osia from Maryland University, one of the founders. He was a professor at Maryland University. Professor Paul David, the Vice Chancellor of the Royal Agricultural University, we lost him last year, he died. And then the remarkable Professor Jeffrey Oldham, who was our UK Head of Delegate Science and Technology to the UN, and he was the director of the SBRO. So we lost people, but we also gained new people, young generations over the last, 15 or 18 years. Why are we doing this? Because we believe in 2 things. We are all human beings, and we have to help each other. And from our side, as academics, we thought the best way to help each other by making sure the knowledge we earn here in the developed countries can easily be earned and shared across the developing countries. So it's not going to benefit us if in the UK or in the US or in Germany we keep developing our knowledge outcome, and those in South Africa or in Sudan or in India, they are not benefiting from this knowledge. Secondly, what we noticed by engaging with UNIDO, UNESCO, many international organizations, those from developing countries, their knowledge output not really reaching our outlets here. So somebody is a good academic in Sri Lanka or in Sudan, his work is not really reaching high-level journals here. So we're trying to bridge that gap. And the other thing is, we are not just here about publishing work or this book, but the idea of putting people together in this book is not about publications, but about multidisciplinary approach to the problems of sustainable development. So from 2004, we have a famous model where we argued, in order to achieve sustainable development goals, you need everyone. And we have been arguing from 2000, 2001, 2003, and 2004, we have that famous model, is that people should come together, political science, engineering, chemistry, public health, medicine, legal people, and many people, they told me in all the conferences we held before, Allam, I hardly sit in a room with people not from my own discipline. So we have lawyers, we have professors of accounting, we have professor of engineering, we have professor of Islamic finance, we have professor of sustainable development in the same room. So this is the beauty of what we do here for 14 years now. Everything we do is available online to download. So this is going to be down online shortly. But we have been doing this from 2004. And the other objective is to travel across the world because we believe the problems of sustainability, while they are global, but they can only be tackled locally as well. So we went to Australia, and we have been told about the problems of water shortage during the summer, where you have to cut your water down. We went to Italy, we went to UAE, we went to St. Lucia, we went to America, and we have been traveling. And next year, I'm very pleased to announce officially the 2019 conference of the WSD will be held in Morocco, hosted by the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and we are very pleased, we are happy to go there, and I invite you all to join us next year. I will finish quickly, because if I start thanking people, I might not finish really. But WAST is not Allam, I'm just representing people, but all those people here in this room, starting by Dr. Gale Rigobert. Gale is not just for us, Honorable Minister from St. Lucia, but she is in our advisory board. So even if you look at our advisory board, we've got private sector, government, and academia. We are not just a bunch of academics. So we've got 3 people from governments in our advisory board. Gale is one of them. We got the High Commission of Uganda in Canada is also in our advisory board. So I would like to thank all our advisory boards, Gale and all of them. I would also like to thank the advisory board of this conference, including people like Professor Abdul Ghadir from Lille University, who else? Professor Ron McQueen, I can't see him, but there are a bunch of people who are our advisory board for this conference. And I would like to thank all those who work very hard, track chairs, all those people. But there is 1 or 2 people, I think you all been psychologically and emotionally attached to them. I would like to really, where is Janet? Janet French. Janet Snow. Can you stand up, Janet? You always, so when people see her on the breakfast, I think Janet could easily have spent or communicated maybe 30, 40 emails with each one of you, just to correct your mistakes here. And in one email, I was really surprised. She said, no, could you please reprint it again? Because it's called organization with an S, in another one, organization with a Z. For me, they both the same, but for her, they're not the same. So we have, and Selma, this program, I think Selma have done 400 copies of 400 times. Changes day and night, it's unbelievable. Maybe 400 changes to this. And still there are mistakes here. And we still got someone named. So I really thank them, Adil, Ahmed, these people hardworking, but plus also the people from the UN, which are already like Luis. Without Lucy, we would not be here because most of the problems, she solved them. So we have to work very hardly with this. I wish you a very happy conference. And as I have been learned from my first director of research when I became an academic, he said to me, Allam, when you go to a conference is not about presentation or the papers. And I said, what? He said to me, you will bring this back home, but what you have to make sure you bring home is communication and networks. And from that time, maybe, don't tell me how long was that, he told me, you can measure your success by attending any conference by the number of business cards they will fly back home with you. If you don't go back home empty of business cards, you have not really achieved 10 out of 10 of this conference. So please make sure this business card should get out of your pocket to someone else. And the second thing, please, if you have lunch with Allam, the next lunch sit down with Selma or try to change people so you can know more people here. And I can assure you, all of the world. Thank you very much. I wish you a very happy, enjoy Geneva, and enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.
We are not jealous of Vienna. It is also UN capital. Thank you very much, Allam. I now invite Mr. Clemens Adams, Director of the Division of Administration, to deliver the message of Mr. Michael Møller, Director General of the United Nations Office at Geneva. Among others, Director General Møller is the champion of the International Geneva Perception Change Project. The project aims to highlight the impact and broaden the overall understanding of the work done by international organizations based in Geneva. As the home of the Joint Inspection Unit is Geneva, this conference might just serve very well the Perception Change Project. The floor is yours, Mr. Adams.
Thank you so much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as just explained, the Director General, Michael Møller, could not regrettably be with us this morning. He is in Paris, but he sends his best regards. Sustainable development issues are at the heart of his thinking and working, and he's asked me to deliver the following remarks on his behalf. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to the Palais des Nations. Thank you to everyone involved, and in particular to the Joint Inspection Unit and the World Association of Sustainable Development to bring us here together today. It has been almost 1,000 days since world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Taking stock of progress, I would say the picture is mixed. On one hand, the ability of the Sustainable Development Goals to surmount traditional boundaries and to be on everyone's agenda, from city mayors to government ministers to academics and business leaders, this has been truly inspiring. The 2030 Agenda really has become what we had hoped it would be, our common roadmap, the leitmotif to guide our collective efforts to create a better world. On the other hand, however, I share our Secretary General's impatience for the change of gear. We have hit the post-2050 ground just walking. We need to pick up the pace and start running towards 2030. The magnitude of our challenges has yet to be met by measures of our actions. Just to consider the following data points. Over 8% of the world people live in poverty. Almost 200 million people are unemployed, while another 300 million workers remain trapped in poverty. Women are still far less likely to participate in the labor market, and the global gender pay gap is still 23%. Young people are 3 times more likely to be jobless. Rampant inequities are stretching the fabric of societies to the breaking point, undermining the social impact. Entire regions can find themselves marooned by waves of progress and left behind by growth. Inclusion has a price: frustration, alienation, instability. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to work together to reduce inequalities, end discrimination, empower people, and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all. Mobilizing the investment necessary to actually deliver the goals by 2030 must be among our priorities. According to some estimates, this requires an additional US $2.4 trillion in investment per year. Public funding cannot close this gap, not even very close. The private sector is an indispensable partner, and we welcome the work of the JIU to facilitate enhanced cooperation between the United Nations system and the private sector to pursue common goals. We call on business of all sizes, from startup to corporate, to innovate market-based solutions that drive inclusion, to do business in ways that works for the global good as much as for the bottom line. There are trailblazers in almost every industry to emulate. You can easily recognize them by the way in which they outperform their peers. From the point, it's quite simply, really, sustainable business is good business. Over these coming days, I invite you to listen, think, and share ideas on how public-private partnerships align with the spirit of the SDGs and how they can help us to endeavor to reach the furthest behind first. I wish you much success in your discussions. These were the words of the Director General, Michael Møller. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. I should add that Director General Møller not only encouraged us to organize this conference, but he was the first one to confirm since the beginning, long time ago, the participation. So it was just by accident that he couldn't be with us today. The International Trade Center is the only multilateral agency fully dedicated to supporting the internalization of the small and medium-sized enterprises. Its joint mandate of the Joint Inspection of the United Nations and the World Trade Organization combines a focus on expanding trade opportunities with the aim of fostering sustainable development. We are honored to have with us today Mrs. Arancha González, the Executive Director of the International Trade Center, to whom I give the floor.
Well, thank you very much, and let me start with a disclaimer. I only had to walk 10 minutes to get to the conference, so I guess I cannot argue that distance was what drove me here. But what drove me here was a belief that this issue of partnerships is partnerships between the United Nations and the private sector is at the heart of the success or the failure of our common agenda called Sustainable Development Goals 2030. I want to start with one clear understanding and one truth, if I may, and this is that partnerships are good. Today, I don't think the question for us or before us is whether or not we should engage in these partnerships, but rather look at what 73 years of partnerships, this is the years in which the United Nations has been in operation, what these 73 years have brought us, what has worked, what we lack, in order to make sure we now move to scale and speed, which is what will allow us to declare success on the 2030 agenda. And this brings me to a topic of the day, which is that isolationism is not going to be a viable solution for us. The interdependence of our countries, of our economies, of value chains, of production processes, of technology, of societies, has made obsolete the notion that impact can be achieved by going it alone. I think this is a very important reminder, in particular today. At the heart of the UN 2030 agenda is to leave no one behind. But in order to do that, we need everybody to play a role. The second truth that I want to bring you today is that we can do good as we do business. That profit and philanthropy don't need to be on opposite sides of the scale. That smart partnerships can bring multiple wins to all involved. That sometimes in the short term, but increasingly and this is where I think we have a bit of difficulty in the medium to long term, where efforts today can create opportunities for tomorrow. This is where I want to commend the work of the JIU that comes at a very critical time for the life of the United Nations, as we are rethinking how we can deliver better as one UN. But facing the reality also that the UN alone or the UN member states alone will not be enough to deliver on our shared compass. We need the private sector, we need academia, we need civil society, we need support institutions, and yes, we need individuals also to build a compact of active partnerships if we are to lift everyone together. And I see a lot of similarities in what the JIU has recommended in its report for scaling up and what we in the International Trade Center are doing. And I want to thank the JIU for recognizing that ITC, together with the UN System Staff College Knowledge Center for Sustainable Development, should host a system-wide platform to facilitate communication with micro, small, and medium enterprises on the opportunities that the 2030 Agenda provides. And why that? Because the micro, small, and medium enterprises are also private sector. Actually, they are the largest part of the private sector in any of our economies. They employ the vast majority of people, and they are amazing incubators of innovation, of inclusive growth, of women's economic empowerment, and this role is being increasingly recognized across the world. At ITC, maybe this is because this is our raison d'etre, we think we need to focus a bit more on micro, small, and medium enterprises. And what I want to bring to you today is the three ways in which we have found working with the private sector in partnerships to work. One, working with the private sector as markets or as investors. Two, that actually is the role of the private sector at the end of the day. Two is working with the private sector as a funder. Three is working with the private sector in a partnership to share knowledge, expertise, know-how, some sort of in-kind support from the private sector. Let me start with the first one, private sector as markets or investors. Our work on fashion, ethical fashion, in Kenya, in Haiti, in Mali, in Pakistan, in Vanuatu, is one example of how this partnership works on the ground, connecting thousands of talented but marginalized artisans, majority of which are, by the way, women, to international fashion companies. This is not charity. This is about the quality of the inputs, this is about the skills of the entrepreneurs, this is about reliability of supply, which are at the core of the relationship. And the results have been transformational, increasing incomes by tenfold, children receiving education, and generational job creation. The same can be said of other sectors, such as agriculture, work we've done in Ghana on cocoa, or in Rwanda on coffee, or IT services in Bangladesh. The private sector can also contribute towards the 2030 Agenda by investing, in particular in the base of the pyramid. Not just because this is the right thing to do, but also because through these investments they can help create tomorrow's markets, those that don't exist today. This is what we are seeing when we help connect mid-sized Indian companies to investment opportunities in East Africa, or when we help de-risk private investment in women-owned enterprises. Second, the private sector partnerships based on provision of funds. This is often perceived as being trickier inverted commas. The UN has recognized that if we want to develop this kind of cooperation with the business community, we will have to change. We will have to modernize our procedures. And I am pleased to see that this is a priority in the UN reform process. This is an agenda that we in the ITC have wholeheartedly embraced. This is something that we see happening, for example, with private sector contributing funds to develop global public goods to ensure more sustainable, more transparent value chains. 3, the area where we see a big increase in partnerships with the private sector is in the provision of in-kind contributions through knowledge, through experience, through know-how with companies such as DHL, eBay, Maersk, Barclays, or through joint advocacy. Sometimes it all has to start with convincing, putting on the table convincing arguments. And when I talk of the private sector, I also refer to foundations, which at the end of the day are very often the other side of the same coin. But what is important to take from all of these examples and many more is that they are replicable and scalable. The UN offers a brand, a very well-respected brand. We are neutral. Our focus is on eradicating poverty and building inclusive and sustainable societies and a future for all. We can go to places and we can do things that many others simply cannot. But on the other hand, the whole is far greater than the sum of its parts. This is our experience. We've tried to capture this in a small brochure that you find outside the room. We hope that our own experiences and our own learning can help others. The business community, whether it's global, whether it's regional, whether it is local, can bring expertise, it can bring innovation, it can bring opportunities that we in the UN may simply be unable to do. In a period where we all need to show results, when we want to show the greatest impact, there is only one solution. It's what I call a compact of the willing, which remains faithful to the 2030 goals, which takes acceptable risks, which is willing to invest in short term for medium and long-term results and gains, and which recognizes that sometimes the race really is not about the swift, but true impact can come from endurance. So thanks again for the invitation and looking forward to the continuation of this debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Executive Director, for your inspiring words. The United Nations Economic Commission for Europe supports member states in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, thanks to its role as a platform for governments to cooperate and engage with all stakeholders on norms, standards and conventions, and its multi-sectoral approach to tackle the challenges of sustainable development in an integrated manner. We are honored to have among us Mrs. Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Europe. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you for the floor. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. While my dear colleague Arancha was speaking on the importance of partnerships with the private sector, I wish to speak about the public-private partnerships for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, because it is very close to our hearts at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And therefore I am very pleased to have an opportunity to speak today at this event organized jointly by the Joint Inspection Unit of the United Nations and the World Association for Sustainable Development. As we have heard, the UNEC is a normative organization. We develop technical standards, guidelines and best practices in many fields pertaining to economic development, including PPPs. Mobilizing new investments in high-quality infrastructure projects is essential, and especially in low and middle-income countries. Such investments can directly eradicate poverty by ensuring access to public services, such as health, education, energy, water, and sanitation. A further critical challenge is climate change. There is a need to promote investments in resilience and to address the risk faced by all people, especially the economically and socially disadvantaged. The SDGs create a new challenge for PPPs. Traditionally, PPPs have been seen as a value for money tool with little regard to mitigating poverty. This is not fit for purpose for the SDGs, nor there is a guarantee that the traditional PPP model will support the successful achievement of the SDGs. There has yet to be a model that is both transformative and responds to the challenges of low and middle income countries where arguably PPPs are needed the most. We need to adapt the traditional PPP model to the SDGs by placing people at the core. PPPs must be implemented according to a broader set of holistic criteria and undertake projects that create value for people. People first PPP projects should increase access to essential services, especially to vulnerable groups. They need to have particularly strong economic effectiveness and transformational impact. They should be replicable. They should cut or significantly reduce CO2 emissions. They should make infrastructure more resilient, and they should engage effectively with all stakeholders. A set of guiding principles on people first PPPs are being elaborated by the UNEC in consultation with a wider UN family, governments, the private sector and civil society organizations. Today, I would like to talk about a particular place where the private sector can make a big difference, and that place is cities. Nowadays, the share of people living in cities is 54% and is expected to rise to 66% in 2050. This percentage reaches 82% in North America and 73% in Europe, which both belong to the UNEC region. Today, cities are struggling to address many challenges such as aging, migration, inequality, security, urban sprawl, informal settlements, pollution and climate change. PPPs must therefore adapt to the reality of cities. Done correctly, the positive results from PPPs can benefit all within the urban context. UNEC has for many years assisted governments to improve their PPP enabling environment via targeted policy advice and capacity building programs. This facilitates private sector involvement in infrastructure and the delivery of public services. We are also developing PPP standards to assist the engagement of public authorities with the private sector. These voluntary standards are organized by sectors and provide SDG-driven project models. They provide good governance approaches and policy recommendations on risk allocation and financing. The focus of these standards is on improving partnering capacity, accelerating projects and investments, and reducing transaction costs. Standards are currently being developed in many sectors such as water and sanitation, health policy, renewable energy, urban rail, roads and airports. These are all extremely relevant to the transition to smart, sustainable cities. The first standard launched by UNEC is on a zero-tolerance approach to corruption in PPP procurement. Corruption is, of course, a key disincentive for private sector investment. As I have already said, if implemented correctly, PPPs have a great potential supporting the transition to a smart, sustainable cities. As part of our work on making PPPs fit for purpose, we have also compiled a large list of success stories on people-first PPPs. These are available also on our website. I hope they can be inspiring to you I would like to share just a couple of them. The first is a PPP for the electric buses in Geneva, a special partnership including Transport Public Genevois, Service Industriel de Genève and ABB Secheron, was formed to deploy smart and revolutionary recharging technology. It allows electric buses in Geneva to rapidly recharge their batteries at bus stops, giving buses unlimited autonomy. The new buses will replace diesel engine buses, resulting in the elimination of thousands of tons of CO2 emissions every year, the reduction of noise pollution by half, and the removal of overhead electrical cables from streets and squares in Geneva. Another project from the UNEC region is, for instance, Pamir hydro power plant in Tajikistan. The partners are the Ministry of Energy and Water Resource of Tajikistan, Pamir Energy, the Aga Khan Foundation, and the government of Switzerland. This project combines commercial success and social and economic effectiveness. It solved the problem of intermittent power supplies and insufficient heating in winter in a low-income region. Today, citizens have all-day power supplies, and the project is being extended to include the whole country and even outside to neighboring Afghanistan and Pakistan. As you can see, amazing results are possible if the private and public sector partner effectively. UNEC's Housing and Land Management Unit also works on the intersection of cities and the private sector. We compile, disseminate and exchange information and experiences on smart, sustainable cities, including housing, urban development and land administration policies. In addition, we develop standards in the areas of smart, sustainable cities, energy, environment and transport, and promote national frameworks for innovation in the member states, which are indispensable for the development of cities. We work with private sector experts on energy, environment, land use planning, etc., as well as other stakeholders through our Real Estate Markets Advisory Board. Thanks to support of this advisory group, we develop a series of integrated studies, including on smart and sustainable urban development, with information on good practices from the UNEC region and also beyond. UNEC is a partner of the global initiative called United for Smart Sustainable Cities with the International Telecommunication Union and actively collaborates with the private sector in this context as well. In particular, this initiative elaborated key performance indicators for smart sustainable cities, which are a free international standard. These indicators fully reflect the SDGs and help cities to evaluate their performance and achievements against the SDG targets. As part of these United Smart Cities, an online marketplace with smart city projects is being developed and is expected to be online this summer. It will connect directly cities with industry and finance sector stakeholders interested in investing into these projects. The UNEC is not only advising but also supporting the implementation of concrete smart sustainable city projects in cooperation with private sector. In May, the Housing and Land Management Unit will launch a demonstration project in cooperation with Astana Innovation Foundation and private sector on building a smart city district in Astana. This experience then is expected to be replicated in several other countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I have been able to demonstrate some of the ways in which we can successfully engage with the private sector to support our efforts towards the SDGs. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Okay. Petru has been very kind, and he said, since we are co-chair, you have to share with me introducing the guests. So I have the honor of even introducing the guest now. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Gale, Honorable Dr. Gale Rigobert, who is the Minister for Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development Goals. And there is no wonder these are the key issues WSD is focusing on, because she is one of our advisors and we follow what she keeps telling us. Gale is a distinguished academic before she became a minister. She got a first-class degree on government from University of West Indies, and a PhD in international relationship, and a PhD from also University of West Indies. She got a scholarship and a master's degree from Cambridge University in the UK. She had made the record in St. Lucia, and I don't know, maybe the whole Caribbean, by being the youngest opposition leader. So before she became a minister, she was opposition. So she fought very hard. So she's the youngest one, women youngest one, which we're very proud of. And also, she has been advisor to the Minister of ICT. Her expertise in, she also spent sometimes at Sussex University as a visiting fellow at some time. She taught our students, so she's a very international woman. It's my great pleasure to give you the floor, Dr. Gale Rigobert.
Thank you, Allam, for this very gracious introduction. I feel very much at home for several reasons, as a space such as this affords someone like me who has transitioned from academia, from the ivory tower into the real world of politics, policy making and implementation. And so I sit at the intersection of those two worlds, what we call praxis. But more importantly, I feel at home here because what WASD has been able to do under the stewardship of Allam is to bring to the center persons, spaces, countries, situations, stories that were previously deemed marginal and therefore remained very quiet on the policy and political agenda in international spaces such as this. I am comfortable, therefore, to ask you, Excellencies, panelists, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, to permit me to situate my remarks within the context of the realities of small island states. Small island developing states such as my own, St. Lucia, which must continue to pursue development in the face of global economic challenges and against the backdrop of the unpredictable ferocity of the events of climate change. As small island developing states, we recognize that despite our limited and depleting resources, we must position ourselves to continue to build resilience in all spheres. Of necessity, we must embrace a holistic notion of resilience: physical or infrastructural, environmental, fiscal, human, and social. In fact, the recently concluded budget debate in my parliament last week pivoted around the theme, building resilience today to secure our future. Resilience building, therefore, speaks to strengthening physical, infrastructural, social, human, and fiscal resilience. While we acknowledge the inherent vulnerabilities of an island state such as mine, it is incumbent on policymakers and the political directorate to shield islands, small island states from avoidable vulnerabilities and to better bolster the country to withstand the vagaries of unavoidable vulnerabilities and their impacts. With respect to building human resilience, we cannot make the kind of progress that is necessary if we continue to starve critical social sectors in particular, such as health and education, of the requisite resources to finance the transformative change that we envisage. It is for this reason that partnerships are so critical. There is a further recognition that SIDS must develop structures and mechanisms that strategically harness resources at all levels of society. Innovate so as to ensure that true inclusiveness is practiced. build a robust system that demonstrates good governance of and to the people, and to give due consideration to the involvement of the private sector in the pursuit of development. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development provides an opportunity for countries such as St. Lucia to revisit its processes, policies, and development plans to ensure that strategies are instituted to mobilize partnerships and strengthen cooperation. This is currently being done with the vision of addressing our development issues that we are determined to resolve as we work towards the achievement of this agenda, notwithstanding the challenges. And there are some very concrete examples of how we've been able to do so. But more importantly, as a first step, is creating a policy framework for public-private partnerships. 2, establishing and enabling institutional framework for 2030 Agenda implementation. 3, fostering partnerships across the various sectors and, in effect, ensuring that all stakeholders have a say and can participate fully. And in St. Lucia, for example, with respect to SDG 2, end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture, we've been able to initiate an activity called the Good Food Revolution, which is working towards promoting improved nutrition and sustainable agricultural policies. And that, of course, we are doing in collaboration with the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, the UNDP GEF SGP, and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. SDG 3. St. Lucia is moving to ratify the Minamata Convention on Mercury and is currently pursuing enabling activities that will provide an informed position for ratification. And of course, we are doing this in partnership with the St. Lucia chapter of the Caribbean Youth Environment Network. And I can go through the various SDGs and highlight the importance of mobilizing and energizing our various partners and stakeholders. In the area of affordable and clean energy, for example, partnerships for our NDC implementation will not only exist at the local level, government and private sector, but also at the level of external developing agencies and private sector partners. Let me focus on climate action SDG 13. The practice of partnering on initiatives that involve the private sector in advocating for climate change actions has yielded significant results. The creative arts community in St. Lucia has been engaged on several occasions to help build awareness around the impacts of climate change. We all know how influential artists and stars can be in activating their fan base and their supporters. We have also been able to pursue the climate change adaptation policy which came into being in 2015, which recognizes that climate change affects everyone and every sector, and has the strapline adapting one individual, one household, one community, one enterprise, and one sector at a time. Again, underscoring the necessity for partnerships. To our mind, it is SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals, that undergirds all other SDGs and development pursuits. It is the gel that will determine the successful achievement of the 2030 Agenda. The extent to which we can localize the 2030 Agenda is regarded as a critical success factor in the process. Partnering with the media to promote best practices, measures, and strategies pertaining to the implementation of the SDGs is an effective way of ensuring that the populace remains informed of government's efforts. What are some of the basic principles behind our experience thus far? transforming the way business is done, finding concrete ways through which SDGs can be promoted through PPPs, recognizing the ability of PPPs to contribute to not only socioeconomic but also socio-environmental benefits, thus promoting SDGs. In small economies such as ours, therefore, there are insufficient financial resources for government to undertake large projects. Additionally, we need to avoid placing pressure on the government budget, considering the competing demands by the various sectors. Therefore, PPPs have the potential to mobilize necessary resources and to deliver on time and on budget. It is important, therefore, to improve the sustainable coordination and cooperation between the public and private sector, thereby deriving the benefits associated with optimizing the resources, knowledge, and experience of the private sector. What is needed for successful PPPs is equipping the public institutions with right capacity, mandate, and coherent policy and legislative framework, creating the enabling environment for the private sector, providing incentives and disincentives for active engagement without compromising on potential benefits and opportunities for the country, creating adequate public awareness on the role of the private sector in contributing to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. And in conclusion, the 2030 Agenda offers a tremendous opportunity to harness and pool our collective resources via PPPs. And we ought to create the enabling environment so we can yield the benefits which ultimately will redound to the benefit of the world's citizens, some of whom are very vulnerable and are in desperate need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the sense of dynamism and energy you bring from the national level, which is at the core of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Thank you very much. The International Organizations of Employers is one of the pillars of the tripartite governance structure of the International Labour Organization. With more than 150 business and employer organization members, the International Organizations of Employers is the recognized voice of business in social and labor policy debates taking place across the United Nations and the multilateral system in general. We are grateful to Mr. Erol Kiresepi, the president of the organization, for his interest and presence in our conference. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Dear ministers, dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here with you today and discuss with you how do we reach the SDGs, what is the contribution of the private sector, and what are the role of partnerships. I am wearing two hats today as President of the International Organization of Employers, the largest network of the private sector in the world, as well as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Santa Pharma, a pharmaceutical company, which has its headquarters in Istanbul, Turkey. It is an old wisdom that the private sector plays a central role in sustainable development and human prosperity. It employs 9 out of 10 people globally, offering income opportunities, training, and career pathways, and thereby contributing to the elimination of poverty. Having a job is the best means against poverty, is a basic condition providing for oneself and one's family. The private sector drives economic growth and provides the necessary goods and services we all need in our daily life. It also applies creativity and innovation to help solve global sustainable development challenges. My own pharmaceutical company, for instance, actively contributes through very affordable and safe medicine to the right for health, a right which is reflected in SDG 3, which aims to achieve access to essential medicines and vaccines. We are very active to support education, through funding of schools, and of course we contribute to SDG 8 regarding sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work, which is quite naturally a core focus of all business, as mentioned before. Partnerships are key for reaching the SDGs. Neither companies nor governments or civil society can afford to work in silos anymore. Indeed, the huge improvement from the MDGs to SDGs was that the role of the private sector for sustainable development and the need for partnerships were recognized in SDG 17. The UN Secretary General's report on the UN reform also reaffirms the need for the United Nations development system to step up the scale of its partnerships to support the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Partnerships can have thereby very different faces, formats, and characteristics. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to partnerships, and the conditionalities apply to them. There can't be only one getaway to PPP between the private sector and UN agencies. If we want to fully harness the potential of public-private partnerships to implement the 2030 Agenda at UN level, as well as at any other level, the engagement needs to be open, dynamic, and flexible. Although partnerships between the public and private sectors at the UN and at national levels has been an important part of the engagement of the private sector in the SDGs so far, there is room for improvement in terms of quantity as well as quality. Some challenges are linked to insufficient awareness in both the private and the public sector about the possibilities of collaborations on the SDGs. The IOE USA Member Federation, the US Council for International Business, USCIB, has launched a website, Business for 2030, to address this issue. Other initiatives, such as the Global Compact or the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, are also very active in this regard. However, we must think about how to accelerate speed here and bring the engagement for the next level. The aim should be also to go beyond the usual suspects and better address companies which have not been so much involved yet. There needs homework to be done also by the public sector. The report of the Joint Inspection Unit points out that the procedures at UN level are often too long and bureaucratic. It takes ages with huge bureaucratic requirements before a PPP is approved. Companies won't do it, but rather do it alone with peers or other initiatives. The public sector needs to be more agile and entrepreneurial to develop better and more appealing approaches to deal with the private sector. There is also often a perception issue. Too often, the role of the private sector is reduced to that of a milk cow to fund certain projects. However, the private sector has so much to offer. As said before, expertise, networks on the ground, and most importantly, he often can directly implement certain projects or ideas. Thus, it is necessary to look more comprehensively on the contribution the private sector has to offer with regard to the SDGs and how public and private sector can leverage their respective strength. We need to become much more strategic in these partnerships. Each player brings his own competitive advantages into a partnership to create the biggest possible impact. Networks are important to learning and exchanging knowledge, and as well as building partnerships. There are many kinds of networks which have different mandates and, in most cases, complement each other. My company, for instance, is a long-standing member of the UN Global Compact. The UN Global Compact is one of the important learning platforms with regards to sustainable business conduct. It is also an important multi-stakeholder network at national level as well as international level for sharing experiences. At the same time, my company is a member of the Turkish Confederation of Employers, TİSK. The Confederation has a different mandate than the UN Global Compact. TİSK is the representative voice of Turkish business vis-à-vis national and international organizations and governmental and intergovernmental processes and institutions, being it, for instance, UN agencies and the G20. TİSK, as well as the national federations in the other countries, have the representativeness and legitimacy as the consolidated voice of business in shaping policy and making sure that policies are actually designed in a way that companies can implement them on the ground without too heavy adverse effects. If the UN wants the SDGs to be successfully implemented on the ground and making a difference to the real life of people, it needs to engage with the representative employers and business organizations. They understand the ground realities and can advise and implement accordingly. Employer federations have a key role to play in the negotiations, implementation, and follow-up mechanism of the 2030 Development Agenda at both the UN and at national levels. Dear colleagues, the UN General Assembly resolution that adopted the SDGs explicitly references the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. This makes the UN guiding principles on business and human rights a powerful and critical companion to the SDGs. Since their unanimous endorsement by the UN Human Rights Council in 2011, the guiding principles have become a global reference point for the respective roles, duties, and responsibilities of states and businesses with regard to business-related human rights impacts. The IOE and its member federations have endorsed the UN guiding principles and are committed to promote their implementation among our business networks and the global business community. Meeting the corporate responsibility to respect human rights is a key contribution and vehicle through which business can help achieve the broader vision of peaceful and inclusive societies embraced by the SDGs. Multi-stakeholder engagement and partnerships are also critical to implement the UN guiding principles. Human rights is not a competitive issue, it's a collaborative issue. Companies need to work together and with stakeholders, governments, and affected communities to address systematic challenges which one player will not be able to address systematically alone. At the end of the day, to fully unleash the potential of partnerships, governments need to create the right enabling environments, both for business to create jobs, drive economic growth and development, and also to create the right collaborative frameworks for business, government, and civil society to work productively together. It is important to measure progress in this regard and to monitor the implementation of the SDG at country level. The measurement methods need to be objective and relevant to ensure that the actors at all levels get the right picture about the state of play and are able to plan and adjust their policy interventions accordingly. Dear colleagues, in the Bahrain Declaration, the global employers community reaffirmed its support to the SDGs and their commitment to contribute to their realization. I want here to restate this confirmation. Business is 100% committed to work on the realization of the SDGs in partnership with the UN as well as with any other stakeholder. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You are in the United Nations House. I think that your comprehensive and frank voice from the private sector was heard by all our colleagues and the distinguished Under-Secretary General here on the podium. Thank you very much. The United Nations Global Compact is the United Nations initiative to encourage businesses worldwide to adopt sustainable and socially responsible policies and the principle-based framework for businesses based on the 10 principles in the areas of human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. Much to her credit, Mrs. Lisa Kingo, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Global Compact, despite her heavy schedule in preparing their next gathering in Argentina on making global goals local business, she found a way to come to this conference. Unfortunately, an unexpected cancellation of flights due to the Lufthansa strike yesterday night prevented her to be here. However, we have the pleasure to have our friend Angus Rennie, who is Senior Manager for Partnership, who will deliver the statement of Lisa Kingo on her behalf. You have the floor.
Thank you, Inspector. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to share these remarks on behalf of Lisa Kingo, who very much regrets that due to her flight cancellation, she was not able to join us. We want to commend the Joint Inspection Unit and the World Association for Sustainable Development for putting together such a diverse group of representatives from all sectors and preparing such a wide-ranging program covering many dimensions of Agenda 2030. I'm sure it will be a rich and very productive few days for us all. There are certainly a number of very compelling policy ideas on the table for us to discuss this week, not the least being the insightful report which Inspector Dumitriu and his team have prepared on UN business partnerships in the context of Agenda 2030. It was very encouraging to see such strong alignment between the inspector's policy proposals and the vision of our Secretary General in his recent reports on repositioning the UN development system, as well as the SDGs towards Global Partnerships report to the General Assembly last year. It is so important that we are all pulling in the same direction when it comes to UN business partnerships. In that regard, we were very pleased to see the inspector's major emphasis on strengthening system-wide approaches to UN business collaboration. This is really critical to fully harnessing the potential of private sector engagement. And we couldn't agree more that the time has come for the UN to embrace a more coordinated approach to policymaking on private sector partnerships and to develop more effective mechanisms for doing so. If we're to truly leverage the power of business in achieving the SDGs, it's imperative that we ensure that business has a clear, accessible, and consistent set of expectations when it comes to partnering with the UN. It's been said many times, but we feel it bears repeating, business tends to view the UN as a singular entity. Now, this poses a real challenge when, in reality, we're a massive, decentralized global organization. We're a diverse constellation of different entities with varying mandates, different objectives, and different governance structures. So adopting a coordinated approach is admittedly easier said than done. But the good news is, from Switzerland to Sudan, from Argentina to Indonesia, indeed in every corner of the planet, the 2030 Agenda offers us a powerful common language and a roadmap for a better world. The unifying force of the SDGs has certainly inspired the UN Global Compact across every element of our operations. In fact, at the same time as the JIU was preparing its report, the Compact was putting finishing touches on a global 2020 strategy designed to jumpstart progress on the SDGs over the next few years. In preparing our global strategy, we met and heard from over 1,500 stakeholders across business, civil society, local networks, UN partners, and governments. And what emerged was a resounding desire for the Compact to build on our core strengths as a normative, principle-based, and inclusive UN entity to become the translator of the SDGs for business everywhere. Our new strategy aims to amplify our existing work on the 10 principles while driving business action on the SDGs, particularly through business innovation and supporting multi-stakeholder partnerships that can drive local progress on the 2030 Agenda. Indeed, one of the most important elements of our strategy is our plan to strengthen and empower our local networks to drive real measurable progress on national sustainable development priorities. We want to thank the leadership of our local networks, and I know some of them are with us today, for their tireless work as champions of the SDGs, mobilizing their local business communities, and building partnerships across sectors in the process. A new set of operational quality standards, newly created regional liaison posts, new regional and global network councils, a new dedicated fund to support emerging networks and to launch new networks, and a more systematic approach to deeper relationships with UN country teams are just a few ways that we're striving to empower the local networks to drive real change on the ground, in particular in developing countries and emerging markets. Over half of our 9,500 company participants come from developing markets, and over half of our participants are SMEs, and more than half of our local networks are based in developing countries. And so, as our strategy recognizes, one of the most important contributions the Compact can make to the SDGs will involve mobilizing these key constituencies to advance local development priorities. Another key element of our new strategy was a review of our governance structure. At the same time that the JIU was drafting its report, the Compact was undertaking extensive consultations on our governance model. We consulted a wide range of stakeholders before submitting proposals to the Secretary General for his consideration in his capacity as chair of our board. As a special initiative of the Secretary General, the Global Compact reports to and is closely guided by the Secretary General. But as a uniquely multi-stakeholder UN initiative, we felt it was also critical to ensure that our governance structure is fit for purpose in the new SDG era and gives all of our different stakeholder groups a strong voice in the Compact's agenda setting and oversight. As an outcome of this exercise, we've introduced an updated governance model that provides a clear role for governments, business, local networks, and civil society to support the Secretary General in guiding our initiative. I'm sure over the next few days there will be many topics where there may be disagreements among us on the role of business in advancing sustainable development, and where the proper parameters and frameworks of public-private partnerships may be disputed. Such debate is healthy and should be welcomed, in particular here at the United Nations. There are more than 3,000 civil society participants in the Global Compact, and we very much value their engagement as critical friends. And as these partners so often remind us, business can be a tremendous force for good, but without a principle-based approach and a commitment to operating responsibly, pursuit of profit can undermine the health of people and planet. And that is why frameworks such as the 10 principles of the Global Compact and the guiding principles on business and human rights are so very important. At the end of the day, as the inspector himself has quite articulately noted, the private sector needs a powerful motivation to engage in the 2030 agenda. We hope that the proceedings of this conference will bring us one step closer to better understanding and harnessing those motivations. We wish you all a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Now to close the meeting, we have a surprise for you. I hope you like it, because after all, we aim at building a sustainable society for the benefit of our children. I think we will have at this point in time a video presentation, please.
Hello to you all in Geneva from London. I'm so thrilled that Lena will be talking to you today about her hopes for the future. One thing we know for sure is that education is going to be the key to that future. All children deserve a high quality education, no matter who they are or where they are in the world. I'm always inspired by children who fight for their right to an education. Children like Ruby Bridges in the US back in the 60s, or more recently, Malala Yousafzai. Lena will certainly be a young lady who fights for her future, and we can all help her with this. At St George's, we believe that education is about so much more than maths and English. We believe that our most important job is to educate the whole child so that they can be valuable citizens in society, people who can make a contribution to our world. We've worked hard over the years in an area of high social deprivation to ensure that our pupils are considerate, respectful, tolerant young people who can make that contribution. We've started to try and work in creative ways with the private sector. We've got a huge regeneration programme in our area, and we're working with the construction companies in a variety of ways, including things like careers fairs, fundraising opportunities, and cultural events. This is only the beginning, and we are excited about where this could lead. I know you're thinking about public-private partnerships this week, and look forward to hearing about the ideas generated at the conference. All children deserve an education that allows them to be the best that they can be, and I look forward to working with you all to make this happen. You are always welcome at St George's. We're just a plane ride away. Have a great time. Thanks for listening.
Lena, now the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lena, and I go to St George's Primary School in London. Thank you so much for giving an 8-year-old child the opportunity to speak to you about how I see my future. In 2030, I will be 20 years old. I really want to be an artist, a doctor, or a gymnast. But sometimes I struggle to concentrate because of the world around me. Children are dying from hunger, poverty, and we are losing people every minute in wars across the world. For me, education is the key for my future. By education, I don't just mean learning maths or English, as my head teacher, Miss Collymore, has just said in her video. Education to me is about many things. For example, learning new skills to help others, living in harmony with the people around me, and to be the best that I can be. At St George's, I have always been a superstar. To be a superstar at St George's, I must always be happy. Happy means H stands for homework, A stands for attitude, P stands for punctuality, the other P stands for participation, and Y stands for yourself. I want you all to be happy by also, first, do all of your homework for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These ones. If you don't know, you can't see. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, you should know. Secondly, your attitude should always be about working together. Very good example. Third, you must be on time and finish the task before 2030. Not on 2030, but not on 2030, but before 2030. Fourth, you must always join in with others. And finally, you should always stand up for yourself and others. So my message to you all, public and private people, is to always be happy. Thank you to all my teachers and friends at St George's, and of course my lovely mum who brought me here from London. Once again, thank you all for listening to an 8-year-old child travelling all the way to you from London to say this message. I wish you a very good conference and a happy day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena, for such a touching and inspiring speech. I think that in terms of the organization of this conference, we should invite Lena to moderate all our debates and give us an example. Thank you, and at least myself, and I hope that the other listeners will try to be happy in the sense that you described. Thank you very much, Lena. Now, with and this note of optimism, let me thank very much the high-level distinguished experts and the officials that attended this opening session. I would like to consider that this is just the beginning of what Allam said, that there's a new kind of networking and doing things together in partnership for the implementation of the agenda. I'd like you to remain seated until we change the setting for the next session. Thank you very much, dear guests. It was a very fascinating day. It was better than I expected. High level of the discussion, high level experts. I think it was a conversation among experts. We had experts on the podium, we had experts on the same. It was a professional discussion. And I think everybody left the first day of the conference with a very good idea, a very good concept, and probably with a new thinking about how to continue partnership with the private sector. As one of the co-organizers of the event, I'm really very satisfied, and probably we will have tomorrow an equally fruitful day. Thank you.
Today's conference was able to bring together persons from various sectors, academia, the political directorate, the private sector, all of who are very critical in the realization of the various SDGs. It can only happen if we all come together and pool our resources.
This was the first day of the WASD conference, and it was a very interesting and impressive day. I've learned that the SDGs really bring people together. I've learned that there is something that I'm going to address tomorrow, which is called the SME gap. There's a lot of work to be done to get SMEs involved in the SDGs, and I think that for me is the take-home of today.
The best thing I experienced today is that we had a great group of people together that all wants to collaborate and all wants to think about bigger and better solutions for the SDGs and about a collaborative agenda that we can jointly deliver on. And so it looks like we'll be financing the SDGs, and we're going to be pulling in large corporates and smaller corporates, which is what we've just been talking about. So I'm excited to continue the dialogue with you.
I'm Shraddha. I'm from India, and I'm coming from Shipping Corporation of India. I'm very delighted that I'm participating in this conference thanks to Dr. Professor Allam Ahmed and his team, and feel that this conference has been very interactive, and this has given a lot of insights into many of the subjects. So I'm really grateful and feel very happy to be part of this.
My name is Gulnash Ashat. I am from Kazakhstan, and I am very happy to be here today. It was such an amazing opportunity, and it motivated me to participate in such events every year. Thank you for organizing such an amazing conference to all people around the world. I am so happy, and the conference was very great. And I can't just say a word. I'm also worrying a bit that I'm here today with different professionals of different countries all over the world.
Thank you to all of you. Here we represent the Kingdom of Bahrain, and here this gift for Dr. Petru, Dumitriu, from the Northern Municipal Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I feel like I received an Oscar. I know it's not an Oscar, but it's a proof of friendship. I'm glad that I received it. I appreciate the gift.
Yes.
I will take time to admire it.
Yes, it's made handmade. Yeah, from pottery.
Thank you very much. I will treasure it, and it will be a nice souvenir of this wonderful day of the conference. And thank you for your presence, and I hope that you enjoy the conference as much as I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, can you guess? Can you guess what is this?
Let me think. Let me think. No, the answer is a plain no.
Anybody can guess what is this?
Can anybody guess?
No. It's tradition woody bed. We call it in Sudan angareb. Yeah, it is from the wood. From the wood, yeah. It's handmade, and in every Sudanese house you will find this bed and small stools. It's tradition in every Sudanese house. Yeah, it's made from wood and handmade.
So I don't have to sleep here.
This is a table. Okay. And also we have this for kids. It's for Sudan map. This is for you.
Thank you very much.
And this is an opener and also handmade.
Thank you very much. But no alcohols, I suppose.
Yes, just cola.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'm glad to attend this international conference. It's so much benefit. It is very wonderful. We benefit from it, and we will continue, inshallah, this conference.
Thank you so much.